Guadalcanal, August 23, 1942. 12:30 a.m. Lieutenant Ohashi Ichiro steps into the water. Behind him, 33 soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army follow in silence. They move across a sandbar at the mouth of what American maps call the Tenaru River. The maps are wrong, it's actually the Ilu River. But that mistake won't matter in about 30 seconds. The tide is high, water reaches their knees, green flares arc overhead, casting an eerie glow across the lagoon. Each man carries an Arisaka rifle with fixed bayonet. The blades are wrapped in cloth and smeared with mud so they won't reflect light. No bullets in the rifles. This is the Japanese way. For night combat, the bayonet is supreme. Ohashi advances steadily. The men move in 4 columns, spacing themselves automatically through years of drill. They're 100 yards from the far bank, 75 yards, 50. On the western shore, behind a log and earth emplacement, Private Jack Rivers adjusts his grip on a water-cooled .30 caliber Browning machine gun. He tilts the barrel down and left. Private Al Schmid, his assistant gunner, feeds the belt. They watch the figures moving through the water. Schmid thinks they look like a bunch of cows coming down to drink. 30 yards to Rivers' right, Private First Class Slim Fairchild hunches behind a .50 caliber machine gun. His weapon fires slower than Rivers' Browning, but each bullet hits considerably harder. Rivers opens fire. The muzzle flash illuminates the sandbar. Tracers arc across the water like crimson blossoms. The sound, 125 rounds per minute, is a continuous roar. Japanese soldiers fall. Some clutch at wounds. Others simply collapse into the water without a sound. But Ohashi and his men don't stop. They press forward. Some step on the backs of fallen comrades as they advance. This is what they were trained for. This is the moment when spirit conquers steel. When courage overcomes firepower, this is the collision. And by morning, 800 Japanese soldiers will be dead. January 10th, 1939. Aizu Wakamatsu, Japan. A young soldier named Umeo Tokita reports to the barracks of the 29th Regiment Home Unit. He's 20 years old, rated first grade in his military physical examination. His village sent 40 men to the barracks that day. 3 months later, on March 25th, something significant happens. The 214th Infantry Regiment forms. The regimental commander travels to the Imperial Palace in Tokyo and receives the regimental flag directly from Emperor Hirohito's hands. The soldiers trade their training rifles for brand new Arisakas. Tokita's bayonet is ground to a razor edge. This impressed strongly on me the reality that I was going off to a bloody war, he will remember decades later. Each soldier receives a badge for his cap, a white tiger on a field of blue, the White Tigers. The name refers to a group of young samurai warriors who fought in Japan's Civil War of 1867. These teenagers chose death over surrender when their cause was lost. They're among the most revered figures in Japanese history. The badge is not symbolic decoration. It's a statement of doctrine. The regiment deploys to China, then in December 1941 to Burma. Tokita and his comrades learn what works. And what works consistently is this: night attacks, bayonet charges, close quarters combat where Japanese spirit and training overcome superior enemy firepower. The doctrine is specific. Before each night attack, the section leader gives the same order. Unload bullets from your rifles. By repeated bayonet drills and past experiences, Tokita recalls, we came to realize that the bayonet is the only and best weapon that protects ourselves and strikes the enemy in night fighting. The preparation is meticulous. Soldiers wrap their bayonet scabbards in cloth to eliminate noise. Those without soundproof socks wrap their boots in fabric. Every metal item that might clink or rattle is covered or removed. White cloth squares are attached to the back of helmets so soldiers can identify each other in darkness. Passwords are confirmed. Attack formations are rehearsed. A section leader briefs his men before an attack in Burma. It is most important for us to approach the enemy position undetected. When we charge, the major part of the regiment will follow us. Never stand up in front of the enemy until I shout, "Charge!" Keep crawling all the way. You will be shot if you stand up. Even if bullets are coming like a shower, don't stand up. If you do, it will be the end of your role. If you crawl, the bullets will fly above you. If you are to die, thrust and thrust with your bayonets. The philosophy is clear. If you think there is no hope of returning alive in the coming attack, it is already a defeat. Once in the fight, we must win. And for years this doctrine works brilliantly. In China, Japanese forces repeatedly defeat larger, better-armed Chinese units through aggressive night attacks. In Malaya, they push down the peninsula against Commonwealth forces with superior firepower. In February 1942, Singapore, the Gibraltar of the East, falls to an assault many military experts considered impossible. The pattern repeats across Southeast Asia. Japanese forces, often outnumbered and always outgunned in terms of artillery and automatic weapons, win through superior tactical aggression and night fighting capability. There's a strategic calculation underlying the doctrine. Western armies, British, American, Dutch, possess industrial firepower advantages, more artillery, more machine guns, better logistics. In daylight, in prepared positions, they're formidable. But at night, in close quarters, when it comes down to bayonets and grenades and individual courage, that's where Japanese training makes the difference. That's where spirit conquers steel. At least, that's the theory. August 7, 1942. Dawn. 18,000 U.S. Marines of the 1st Marine Division assault beaches at Guadalcanal, Tulagi, and smaller, neighboring islands in the Solomon Chain. It's the first American amphibious offensive of the Pacific War. The Japanese defenders on Tulagi and Gavutu fight viciously. But on Guadalcanal itself, resistance is minimal. Most of the personnel are Korean laborers conscripted to build an airfield. Japanese combat troops are elsewhere. By nightfall, Marines control Lunga Point and the nearly complete airfield. On August 12th, the airfield is formally named Henderson Field after Major Lofton Henderson, a Marine pilot killed at Midway 2 months earlier. That same day, the first American aircraft land on the Strip. Within a week, 2 full squadrons, 19 Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighters and 12 Douglas SBD Dauntless dive bombers, operate from Henderson. The strategic significance is immediately clear to both sides. An operational airfield on Guadalcanal allows control of the sea approaches to Australia. Land-based aircraft can interdict Japanese shipping throughout the Solomon Islands. The entire Japanese defensive perimeter in the South Pacific becomes vulnerable. At Rabaul, 650 miles northwest, Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake commands the Japanese 17th Army. He receives immediate orders: recapture the airfield, drive the Americans off Guadalcanal. Hyakutake selects Colonel Kiyonao Ichiki to lead the vanguard force. Ichiki is an experienced commander. His regiment fought in China. They're veterans. They know how to win. The colonel assembles 917 men, the first element of his detachment. The rest of his regiment will follow once the beachhead is secure. Japanese intelligence estimates approximately 2,000 American troops on Guadalcanal. Lightly armed, probably demoralized after the Japanese Navy's devastating victory in the Battle of Savo Island on August 9th, which sank 4 Allied cruisers and killed over 1,000 sailors. The actual number of Marines on the island, 11,000, but Ichiki doesn't know this. His intelligence is catastrophically wrong. He suffers from what Japanese officers call victory fever, the exhilarated certainty that comes from an unbroken string of successes. In 3 years of war, Japanese forces have rarely lost. Why should Guadalcanal be different? The plan is straightforward. Land east of the American perimeter, march west, launch a surprise night attack. bayonets and grenades, overwhelm the defenders with aggressive spirit before they can organize effective resistance. It's worked before. In China, in Malaya, at Singapore. It should work again. On August 19th, Ichiki's force lands at Taivu Point, 20 miles east of Henderson Field. They begin moving west, approaching the marine perimeter. American patrols detect the Japanese on August 20th. Major General Alexander Vandegrift, commanding the 1st Marine Division, reinforces the eastern edge of his perimeter. He positions the 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, along the Ilu River. The waterway marine maps incorrectly label the Tenaru. Lieutenant Colonel Edwin Pollock commands the battalion. He establishes defensive positions along the west bank, machine guns at key points, interlocking fields of fire, barbed wire strung across likely approaches. His Marines dig foxholes and wait. Just after midnight on August 21st, Japanese scouts probe the marine lines. They find a sandbar where the river meets the ocean, a natural crossing point. They report back to Ichiki. The colonel makes his decision. Attack. Now. Hit the Americans before they're fully prepared. It's a night attack. Japanese specialty. This is what his men train for. Lieutenant Ohashi and his platoon, 34 soldiers, will lead the assault. They move toward the sandbar. Bayonets fixed, rifles unloaded. They step into the water. The water is warmer than Ohashi expected. It reaches mid-thigh, then drops to knee depth as he advances across the sandbar. Overhead, green flares burst, fired by Marines who've spotted movement. The light is eerie, surreal. It turns the water into a glowing emerald pathway. Ohashi and his men keep advancing, 50 yards from the western bank, 40, 30. On the marine side, Rivers and Schmid watch the approaching figures through their Browning sights. The weapon between them, the M19-7A1 water-cooled 30 caliber machine gun, weighs 93 pounds with its tripod. It's a First World War design, but devastatingly effective. The water jacket around the barrel allows sustained fire without overheating. Rate of fire, 450-600 rounds per minute, though Rivers keeps it to about 125 to conserve ammunition and maintain accuracy. Each cloth belt holds 250 rounds. Rivers has 6 belts stacked next to the gun. He squeezes the trigger. The gun roars. Muzzle flash illuminates the sandbar. Tracer rounds, every 5th bullet, arc across the water in red streaks. The rest of the bullets are invisible in the darkness, but their effects are immediate. Japanese soldiers fall. Some are dead before they hit the water. Others clutch at wounds, screaming. A few, hit in the legs or abdomen, try to crawl forward. But the formation keeps coming. This is the moment of truth in Japanese tactical doctrine. The critical seconds when spirit must overcome firepower. When trained soldiers, knowing they might die, drive forward into the storm of bullets because retreat is unthinkable. More Marines open fire. To Rivers' right, Fairchild's 50 caliber adds its slower, heavier rhythm. Each bullet weighs 1.7 ounces, more than 3 times the weight of a 30 caliber round. The weapon was originally designed to shoot down aircraft. Against human targets, the effects are catastrophic. Bars join in, Browning automatic rifles, 1 in each Marine rifle squad, 20-round magazines, semi-automatic or full auto fire. The Marines have learned to conserve ammunition, firing controlled bursts rather than emptying magazines. And artillery. Mortars drop illumination rounds, then high explosive, the 60mm mortars of the Battalion Weapons Company. Then heavier rounds from 81mm mortars positioned farther back. Some Japanese soldiers reach the western bank. They scramble up the mud, screaming, "Tenno Heika Banzai!" Long live the Emperor! Hand-to-hand fighting erupts. Bayonets against bayonets. Grenades explode. Marines grab entrenching tools, small folding shovels, and use them as weapons when rifles jam or run empty. But these breakthrough points are isolated. Most of Ohashi's platoon dies in the water or on the sandbar. Those who reach the marine line fight desperately but are quickly overwhelmed by superior numbers and firepower. The attack falters, stalls, breaks. Surviving Japanese soldiers retreat back across the sandbar, dragging wounded comrades. Colonel Ichiki observes from the eastern bank. He sees his leading platoon shattered, but withdrawal is not an option, not in Japanese military doctrine. Not when the emperor's honor demands victory. He commits more troops. Wave after wave, through the remaining hours of darkness, Japanese soldiers charge across that sandbar. Each time, marine machine guns cut them down. Each time, a few reach the western bank. Each time, they die in the marine defensive positions. The mathematics are brutal and inescapable. A .30 caliber Browning fires 125 rounds per minute. Multiply that by multiple guns firing simultaneously. Add rifle fire from M1 Garands, semi-automatic 8-round clips and bars. Add grenades, mortars, artillery. The defensive firepower is overwhelming. Japanese courage and training cannot overcome it. Individual soldier quality means nothing when facing coordinated interlocking fields of automatic weapons fire. Dawn breaks around 5:30 a.m. In the gray morning light, the scene is apocalyptic. The sandbar is covered with bodies, the water is red. Wounded Japanese soldiers lie in heaps, some still moving, some still trying to fire rifles or throw grenades. Colonel Ichiki realizes the frontal assault has failed. He shifts tactics, trying to flank the marine position from the south. Lieutenant Colonel Pollock anticipates this. He's kept his Company L in reserve. Now he commits them along with 5 M3 Stuart light tanks that have crossed the river upstream. The tanks, nicknamed Honey by their crews, weigh 12 tons each. They mount a 37mm main gun and 3 .30 caliber machine guns. Against fortified positions, they're marginally effective. Against infantry in the open, they're devastating. The tanks roll into the Japanese force from the flank. Machine guns firing, main guns loaded with canister shot, essentially giant shotgun shells filled with steel balls. The Japanese have no anti-tank weapons. Some soldiers try to climb onto the tanks, attempting to pry open hatches or stuff grenades into vision ports. A few succeed. Most are shot down by Marines providing close infantry support. By mid-morning, the battle is over. Ichiki's force is annihilated. Approximately 800 Japanese soldiers lie dead. Another 30 are captured, though most of these are too severely wounded to resist. Marine casualties, 35 killed, 75 wounded. The kill ratio is approximately 53-1. Colonel Ichiki retreats into the jungle with 15 surviving soldiers. He burns his regimental colors so they won't be captured. Then he shoots himself. In Japanese military tradition, a commander who loses his entire force has failed the emperor. Death is the only honorable response. That night, Major General Vandegrift walks the battlefield. He's seen combat before, in France during the First World War, in Nicaragua, in various Caribbean interventions, but he's never seen anything like this. "I have never heard or read of this kind of fighting," he tells his staff. "These people refuse to surrender. The wounded wait until men come up to examine them and blow themselves and the other fellow to pieces with a hand grenade." The Marines learned something critical that morning. Japanese soldiers are brave, disciplined, well-trained. But their doctrine is suicidal. They'll attack prepared positions in frontal assaults. They won't surrender even when wounded and helpless. They'll fight to the death regardless of the tactical situation. This makes them predictable. And predictability in warfare is fatal. June 15th, 1944. 8:40 a.m. 2 years after Guadalcanal, the mathematics of the Pacific War have shifted dramatically. The 2nd and 4th Marine Divisions assault Saipan, a heavily fortified island in the Marianas 1,500 miles from Tokyo. This is no jungle backwater. Saipan is Japanese territory administered as part of the home island since 1920. Nearly 30,000 Japanese troops defended, along with 20,000 civilians. The American force numbers 71,000, 2 Marine divisions plus the U.S. Army's 27th Infantry Division in reserve. But size isn't the only difference from Guadalcanal. American amphibious doctrine has evolved. Naval bombardment is heavier, longer, more precise. Close air support is coordinated through forward air controllers on the ground. Artillery lands with the assault waves, 105mm howitzers providing immediate fire support. And the infantry itself is different. More machine guns per unit, flamethrowers in every battalion. The M22 model, capable of shooting napalm 50 yards, bazookas, demolition charges, better radios for coordination. The Marines who hit Saipan's beaches have learned hard lessons. At Tarawa, at Kwajalein, at Eniwetok. They know how to establish defensive perimeters, how to coordinate artillery with infantry advances, how to use tanks in close support without exposing them to Japanese tank hunter teams. The Japanese defensive doctrine, by contrast, remains largely unchanged. Attack, aggressive spirit, bayonet charges, accept death rather than surrender. The initial landings are brutal. Japanese artillery, pre-registered on the beaches, inflicts over 2,000 casualties on the first day. But the Marines establish a beachhead. By nightfall, 20,000 American troops are ashore. For 3 weeks, the battle grinds forward. The Marines and Army soldiers push north, compressing Japanese forces into the island's mountainous northern end. Artillery pounds defensive positions. Flamethrowers burn out cave complexes. Tanks provide mobile firepower. By early July, the situation is hopeless for the Japanese defenders. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito commands the Japanese 43rd Division and attached naval forces. He's a professional soldier, educated at the Imperial Japanese Army Academy, veteran of campaigns in China and Manchuria. He knows the battle is lost. There will be no reinforcements, no resupply, no evacuation. The Imperial Japanese Navy attempted to intervene, sending a carrier task force to attack the American invasion fleet. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, fought June 19-20, resulted in catastrophic Japanese losses. Over 600 aircraft destroyed, 3 carriers sunk. American pilots call it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. No help is coming. On July 4, 1944, General Saito holds a final conference with his surviving commanders. They discuss options. None are good. They could fight a defensive battle, holding out as long as possible. But ammunition is running low. Food is nearly gone. Medical supplies exhausted, or they could attack. One final gyokusai, smashing the jewel. An honorable death, taking as many enemies as possible rather than slow starvation in caves. Saito chooses attack. He drafts a message to his troops. I will advance with those who remain to deliver still another blow to the American devils and leave my bones on Saipan as a bulwark of the Pacific. The attack is scheduled for July 7th before dawn. Every soldier capable of walking will participate. The walking wounded, sailors who've never trained for infantry combat, civilian volunteers armed with bamboo spears. The formation will advance from north to south, hitting the U.S. Army's 27th Infantry Division positions. On July 6th, General Saito and Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, who commanded the carrier force at Pearl Harbor, commit ritual suicide. Seppuku conducted with proper ceremony. Their aides burn their bodies to prevent desecration. The commanders are dead before the attack begins. This is not cowardice, it's adherence to code. The commanders have failed. They've lost the battle. Death is required, but their suicide comes before the attack, not during it. Because their role is to give the order, then accept responsibility for the defeat. The attack itself will be led by colonels and majors, men who will die with their troops. July 7, 1944, 4 a.m. Captain Benjamin Salomon, a dentist serving as surgeon for the 2nd Battalion, 105th Infantry Regiment, works in his aid station 50 yards behind the front line. Wounded soldiers lie on stretchers. Medical corpsmen prepare bandages, morphine, plasma. Saipan hears shooting from the perimeter, then screaming. Not the usual harassing fire, something different. A wall of sound rolls toward the American positions. Thousands of voices shouting, "Banzai! Banzai!" The largest banzai charge of the Pacific War hits the 105th Infantry Regiment's 1st and 2nd Battalions. Over 4,000 Japanese soldiers surge forward in the pre-dawn darkness. The strongest troops lead, soldiers who can still run, still fight effectively. Behind them come the wounded, some hobbling on makeshift crutches, some crawling. Naval personnel who've never trained for ground combat. Civilians carrying bamboo spears or kitchen knives. Many are unarmed. They plan to pick up weapons from the dead. The attack hits a seam between the 1st and 2nd Battalions, a weak point in the American defensive line where coordination between units is imperfect. Japanese troops pour through. The Americans fight back with everything they have. Machine guns firing until barrels glow red, rifles on semi-automatic, Marines and soldiers firing until their trigger fingers cramp. Grenades thrown by the caseload. Artillery shells with proximity fuses set to explode above Japanese formations. But there are too many attackers. The weight of numbers, 4,000 men willing to die, overwhelms sections of the line. Hand-to-hand combat erupts. Bayonets, knives, entrenching tools, helmets used as clubs, men grappling in darkness, unable to distinguish friend from enemy until they're close enough to touch. Private First Class. Harold Egerholm, a Marine attached to an artillery battery, sees wounded soldiers trapped in the overrun position. He makes repeated trips into the combat zone, dragging casualties to safety. He saves several lives before a machine gun burst kills him. He'll receive the Medal of Honor posthumously. Captain Saipan's aid station is directly in the path of the Japanese advance. Enemy soldiers burst into the tent. Saipan grabs an M1 rifle and shoots them. More Japanese arrive. Saipan kills them with a .45 caliber pistol. He orders his corpsmen to evacuate the wounded. Then he drags a machine gun to the entrance of the aid station. He sits behind it and begins firing at the approaching Japanese forces. By the time American reinforcements retake the position, Saipan is dead. His body is surrounded by 98 dead Japanese soldiers. The machine gun's barrel is shot out. Saipan himself has 76 bullet and bayonet wounds. He kept fighting long after any normal human would have collapsed. He'll be recommended for the Medal of Honor, but the award will be denied because medical personnel aren't supposed to engage in combat. Decades later, in 2002, the denial will be reversed. Captain Saipan will receive the Medal of Honor 58 years late, but that morning there's no time for such considerations. The battle rages for 15 hours. Marine and Army artillery shifts to point-blank range. The 105mm howitzers, designed to fire at targets miles away, are aimed directly at Japanese formations 200 yards from the gun positions. Firing over open sights, shell casings piling up around the guns, tanks join the fight. M4 Shermans, 30 tons mounting 75mm guns and multiple machine guns, roll into Japanese concentrations. The 75mm shells loaded with high explosive are devastating in close quarters. And machine guns, always the machine guns. .30 caliber, .50 caliber, the heavier weapons mounted on vehicles and tanks. Firing until ammunition runs low, then resupplied from rear echelon dumps. Gradually, inevitably, American firepower prevails. By evening, the attack is broken. Japanese forces retreat, those few still alive. The Marines and Army soldiers retake all lost ground. The battlefield is a slaughterhouse. Japanese bodies lie in windows, literally piled on top of each other in some places. In front of the 105th Infantry's positions. 2,295 dead. To the rear, where Japanese forces penetrated deepest, 2,016 more. Total Japanese dead, 4,311. American casualties, 406 killed, 512 wounded. The kill ratio is approximately 4.7 to 1, far worse than the Marines achieved at Guadalcanal, but still decisive. 2 American officers received the Medal of Honor. Lieutenant Colonel William O'Brien and Private First Class Thomas Baker both fought until killed, holding positions against overwhelming numbers. On July 9, 1944, Saipan is declared secure. The horror doesn't end. Over the following days, Marines watch helplessly as hundreds of Japanese civilians commit mass suicide, jumping from cliffs at the island's northern tip rather than surrender to American forces. They've been told Americans will torture and kill them. They choose death instead. The total civilian death toll on Saipan exceeds 22,000. The military dead, Japanese and American combined, add another 28,000. All for an island 12 miles long and 5 miles wide. Between August 1942 and July 1944, between Guadalcanal and Saipan, the United States Marine Corps underwent a systematic transformation. The transformation wasn't technological. American weapons in 1944 weren't dramatically different from those in 1942. The M1 Garand rifle remained standard. The Browning machine guns were the same models. Artillery improved incrementally but wasn't revolutionary. The transformation was doctrinal, tactical, a complete rethinking of how to fight the Japanese. After the Tenaru battle, Marine commanders analyzed what worked. They identified patterns. They developed countermeasures. The result, a comprehensive defensive doctrine specifically designed to defeat Japanese night attacks and banzai charges. First principle. Interlocking fields of fire. Every approach to American positions is covered by at least 2, preferably 3 machine guns firing from different angles. If one gun jams or is knocked out, others continue firing. There are no gaps, no dead zones where attackers can advance unmolested. Second principle. Defensive depth. The perimeter isn't a single line, it's 3 lines. Forward positions, main defensive line, reserve positions. Attackers who break through the first line face fresh troops in prepared positions, deeper back. Third principle, illumination. Night attacks work when attackers can approach unseen. Marines counter with flares, searchlights, and artillery shells with time delay fuses designed to burst above enemy formations and light up the battlefield. Later in the war, they'll add radar-controlled searchlights that track movement automatically. Fourth principle. Pre-registered artillery. Every likely avenue of approach has coordinates already calculated. When Japanese attacks develop, artillery shells are landing within 60 seconds, mortars even faster, 30mm and 81mm tubes positioned immediately behind the front line. Fifth principle. Combined arms coordination. Infantry, artillery, tanks, and air support work together through improved radio communication. By 1944, every Marine rifle company has multiple radio sets. Forward observers can call in artillery or airstrikes directly, and perhaps most importantly, reserves positioned for immediate counterattack. When Japanese forces penetrate the line, as they inevitably do because individual Japanese soldiers are brave and skilled, American reserves counterattack immediately, sealing the breach before it can be exploited. The Marines also evolve offensive tactics, more flamethrowers. The M22 model becomes standard in every infantry battalion. Operators learn to use short bursts, 2 seconds of flame, conserving fuel rather than sustained streams. More demolitions. Satchel charges, Bangalore torpedoes, shaped charges for destroying bunkers and fortifications. Better infantry tank coordination. Tank crews learn to work with infantry teams, the tanks providing mobile firepower and armored protection while infantry protects the tanks from close-range attack. And systematic exploitation of Japanese predictability. By 1944, Marines know exactly what to expect. Japanese forces will attack at night. They'll come in waves, screaming. They won't retreat even when attacks fail. Wounded Japanese soldiers will fight until killed. This predictability allows precise preparation. Marines can position machine guns knowing exactly where attacks will develop. They can pre-position ammunition, medical supplies, reserves. They can plan counterattacks before attacks even begin. The Japanese, meanwhile, make no comparable evolution. Some commanders recognize the problem. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding Japanese forces on Iwo Jima in 1945, explicitly forbids banzai charges. He orders his troops to fight from prepared positions, forcing Americans to dig them out one by one. The battle lasts 36 days instead of the predicted 5. But Kuribayashi's tactics inflict far more American casualties than traditional banzai charges would have. But Kuribayashi is the exception. Most Japanese commanders cling to traditional doctrine: spirit over materiel, aggressive attack, accept death rather than surrender. The doctrine worked brilliantly from 1931 to 1942 against Chinese forces, against colonial powers in Southeast Asia, against Allied forces before they adapted their tactics. But by 1944, it guarantees maximum Japanese casualties for minimal American losses. The Battle of Peleliu in September 1944 kills 10,695 Japanese defenders for 1,694 American dead. The Battle of Iwo Jima in February 1945, 18,844 Japanese dead, 6,821 American dead. The Battle of Okinawa from April to June 1945, over 100,000 Japanese military and civilian dead, 12,520 American dead. Each battle follows the same pattern. Japanese defend stubbornly from prepared positions. Then, as defeat becomes inevitable, they launch suicidal banzai charges that kill some Americans but result in the complete destruction of the attacking force. The mathematics are brutal. Japanese courage cannot overcome American firepower, logistics, and tactical adaptation. Major Hoshida Hiyoshi, intelligence officer of the Japanese 43rd Division, is captured after the Saipan banzai charge. American interrogators ask him about the attack. Why launch a charge everyone knew would fail? His answer is illuminating. They knew at the outset that they had no hope of succeeding. They simply felt that it was better to die that way and take some of the enemy with them than to be holed up in caves and be killed. This is the Japanese soldier's dilemma, distilled to its essence. Military training emphasizes honor above survival. The soldier's duty is to fight for the emperor, to embody the warrior spirit, to choose death over surrender. These aren't empty slogans, they're deeply internalized values reinforced through years of training and cultural conditioning. A soldier surrounded, out of ammunition, facing certain defeat has two options under this code. He can surrender. But surrender means dishonor, not just for himself but for his family, his village, his emperor. Japanese training includes stories of Allied forces torturing and killing prisoners. Whether true or exaggerated, these stories reinforce the belief that surrender is worse than death. Or he can attack. Even with no hope of victory, he can die fighting. Die honorably. Take some enemies with him. Demonstrate the warrior spirit one final time. For Japanese soldiers raised in this tradition, the choice is obvious, and so they charge. At Tenaru, Lieutenant Ohashi and his men knew they were attacking a prepared defensive position. They saw the machine gun positions. They understood the risk. But attacking was their duty, their honor, their only acceptable choice. 800 Japanese soldiers died in that battle. They died bravely, disciplined, following their code perfectly, and they accomplished nothing except teaching Americans exactly how to kill them more efficiently. At Saipan, the men who made that final charge knew, absolutely knew, they were going to die. General Saito's message was explicit. This wasn't an attack to recapture the island. It was a death charge, honorable suicide, 4311 Japanese soldiers died, many wounded Americans as well, 9 and 18 casualties total. But the attack didn't change the battle's outcome. Saipan still fell. The Americans still built air bases. B-29 bombers still began raiding the Japanese home islands. The courage was real. The sacrifice was genuine. The honor by the standards of bushido was absolute. But strategically, tactically, militarily, it was meaningless. Worse than meaningless, it was counterproductive. Every banzai charge taught American forces exactly how to defeat the next one. Every suicidal attack eliminated experienced Japanese soldiers who might have fought more effectively from defensive positions. Every adherence to the code of honor guaranteed maximum casualties for minimal enemy losses. The Americans, meanwhile, developed their own code. Marines fought bravely. The Medal of Honor citations prove that. But American military culture emphasized accomplishing the mission, not dying gloriously. A Marine who retreated from an untenable position to fight again later wasn't dishonored. He was smart. A soldier who surrendered when wounded and surrounded wasn't a coward. He was a prisoner of war who might escape or be liberated. American doctrine optimized for victory, not honor. Japanese doctrine optimized for honor even when it guaranteed defeat. The contrast is stark in casualty ratios. At Tenaru, 53-1, at Saipan, 4.71, at Atu in the Aleutians, where 2,600 Japanese launched a banzai charge in May 1943. Only 28 survived, but they killed 549 Americans, a ratio of about 4.6:1 against the attackers. These numbers tell the story. Japanese soldiers fighting from prepared defensive positions could inflict significant casualties. But banzai charges, the ultimate expression of the warrior code, resulted in slaughter, and the slaughter continued. Because the code demanded it. August 21, 1942. Dawn, Guadalcanal. Lieutenant Ohashi Ichiro lies dead on a sandbar at the mouth of a river American maps incorrectly label the Tenaru. Around him, hundreds of his comrades lie dead as well, some in the water, some on the sand, some who reached the western bank and died fighting among the American positions. The Marines walk the battlefield in the gray morning light. They're shaken by what they see. Not by the violence. They've trained for combat, they expected casualties, but by the totality of it. The complete unwillingness of Japanese soldiers to surrender even when wounded, even when the battle was obviously lost. These people refuse to surrender, General Vandegrift says. The wounded wait until men come up to examine them and blow themselves and the other fellow to pieces with a hand grenade. It's a lesson the Marines will remember. Every battlefield will reinforce it. Japanese soldiers who appear dead might suddenly rise and attack. Wounded Japanese soldiers will detonate grenades when Americans approach. Captured documents must be searched carefully. Booby traps are common. The cultural gulf is enormous. Americans fight to win and go home. Japanese soldiers fight to embody the warrior spirit even unto death. 2.5 years later, on July 9, 1944, Marines on Saipan watched Japanese civilians jump from cliffs rather than surrender. Mothers throw their children into the ocean, then jump themselves. Old men leap from 100-foot heights onto rocks below. The Marines try to stop them. They use loudspeakers promising safety and fair treatment. They offer food and medical care. Some civilians listen and survive, but hundreds choose death. This is the same code that produces banzai charges, the same emphasis on honor over survival, the same cultural conditioning that makes death preferable to the shame of surrender. And it's a code that modern industrial warfare ruthlessly punishes. In the pre-modern era, when wars were fought primarily with swords, spears, and individual combat, warrior codes emphasizing honor and courage made strategic sense. A disciplined force of dedicated warriors could defeat larger numbers of less motivated troops. Spirit mattered as much as steel, but industrial warfare operates by different mathematics. Firepower multiplies force. A single machine gun properly positioned can kill hundreds of attackers. Artillery can devastate massed formations from miles away. Combined arms tactics, infantry, armor, artillery, air support working together create firepower densities that no amount of courage can overcome. In this context, a warrior code that demands frontal attacks against prepared positions becomes a death sentence. Courage that prevents tactical retreat becomes a fatal flaw. Honor that forbids surrender eliminates any possibility of preserving forces for future battles. The Japanese military of 1941-1945 was caught between two eras. Their training, their culture, their entire military doctrine was rooted in pre-modern warrior traditions. But they fought against powers that had fully embraced industrial warfare, and the results were mathematically predictable. At Tenaru, Lieutenant Ohashi and his platoon did everything their training demanded. They advanced silently. They maintained formation under fire. They charged courageously when ordered. They fought until death rather than surrender. They followed the code perfectly. And they died in windrows on a sandbar while Marine machine gunners, many of whom had never been in combat before, cut them down with methodical efficiency. The tragedy isn't that the Japanese lacked courage. They had courage in abundance. More than enough to win battles against opponents who fought by similar rules. The tragedy is that courage alone, divorced from tactical flexibility, from realistic assessment of firepower disparities, from willingness to preserve forces when retreat was necessary, became a guarantee of death. American forces learned this quickly. By 1943, Marines and soldiers knew what to expect from Japanese forces. They knew about banzai charges. They knew Japanese soldiers wouldn't surrender. They knew night attacks were coming. And they prepared accordingly, with machine guns, artillery, illumination, interlocking fields of fire, and combined arms tactics designed specifically to defeat predictable Japanese attacks. The Japanese soldier remained brave, disciplined, and skilled. But his doctrine made him predictable. And predictability in modern warfare is fatal. On Saipan, after the largest banzai charge of the war, American burial details counted 4,111 Japanese bodies. They treated 918 of their own casualties, 406 dead, 512 wounded. The mathematics were brutal, but they were also final. Every Japanese soldier who died in that charge had chosen honor over survival. They had embodied the warrior spirit. They had fought courageously until death. By the standards of bushido, they had succeeded completely. By the standards of modern warfare, they had accomplished nothing except adding to the casualty count. And that ultimately is the lesson of the banzai charges. Not that Japanese soldiers lacked courage, but that courage, when it becomes doctrine in an era of industrial firepower, transforms from virtue into fatal flaw. The Marines learned to respect Japanese fighting spirit while systematically preparing to defeat it. The Japanese learned nothing because their code forbade the kind of flexible, pragmatic adaptation that might have saved lives. And so the charges continued. At Saipan, at Peleliu, at Iwo Jima, at Okinawa, each time thousands of Japanese soldiers shouting banzai running toward American lines, each time American machine guns and artillery cutting them down. Until finally, in August 1945, it ended. Not on a battlefield, but in two blinding flashes over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The warrior code that demanded death over surrender, that valued honor above survival, had driven Japan to fight long past the point when defeat was certain. And in the end, the mathematics were inescapable. Courage cannot overcome firepower. Spirit cannot defeat steel. And honor, divorced from strategic reality, becomes just another word for suicide.